Good afternoon, everyone.
All your systems using a bit of kit.
Hope you're well. Thank you for coming. Just to be clear, this session is about SMEs and digital transformation. I gather there was an issue about the room. If you're here for something different, you don't want to talk about cloud computing, feel free to leave. I won't hold it against you. I'm Clive Richardson. I'm a senior manager in the UK public policy team for Amazon Web Services. We'll do some introductions and then I'll give a bit of background.
Hi everyone, my name's Jo Mower.
Nice try.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Jo Mower and I'm the acting COO with Airbox Systems.
I'm Dan White. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Synologic.
I'm Phil Glanville, elected now of Hackney, and I co-politically lead the London Office of Technology and Innovation for London Councils.
So we're here to talk about how SMEs are helping government transform using cloud computing and cloud technology. I'm not going to assume anyone knows a great deal about cloud technology, so I'll give a little bit of a background on what it is, about kind of how it's good for SMEs, what government's doing, and then I'm going to hand over to Joe and Dan to talk about their experience running businesses using cloud technologies. But what is cloud computing? So in AWS, we talk about cloud computing as the on-demand delivery of IT resources via the internet, pay-as-you-go pricing. So instead of buying, owning and maintaining your own data centers and servers, organizations can acquire technology such as computing power, storage, databases and other services over the internet on an as-needed basis. Why is this transformative? I think it's helpful to think about other sort of infrastructure. Ever since the beginning of the modern industrial era, most businesses haven't had to run their own power plants or have their own water treatment plant. They just tap into a much wider network, which is run by dedicated infrastructure providers. And in the same way, moving from on-premises computing to the cloud means that cloud providers manage and maintain that technology infrastructure in a secure environment, and then businesses access these resources to build their own applications on top of it. The benefit for small businesses, but my colleagues will completely correct me if I get this wrong and they'll give it their own perspective, is it can be revolutionary. So for the first time, anyone can start a business running on the latest technology. Cloud computing makes it much easier for small businesses to combine flexibility of startup with the computing power of like the world's leading technology companies. Instead of committing to buy expensive IT equipment up front when if you don't know how it's going to be used, companies have got the ability to flex up and down their usage of cloud tech on a day-by-day or even hour-by-hour basis. And I've got a report here from Public First, a consultancy, which is from 2020, so it's a little bit outdated, but it does show that cloud computing is becoming increasingly important for UK businesses, for fast-growing companies. Companies running in the cloud are 3 times more likely to be growing at over 5% a year than those that don't. Admittedly, that was in a slightly different economic context, and the numbers may well be a little bit different. So how is government taking advantage of cloud tech? So government, as you know, has historically sort of struggled a little bit with IT. We all know stories of frequent delays, cost overruns, and the tech available not being at the very cutting edge. We're sort of used to like the most impactful ideas and innovations coming from startups and small businesses. The government's traditionally kind of had a bit of a challenge in buying from SMEs on the technology front. If you think about running public services, you need a high level of security. Data is very sensitive, and traditionally it's been sort of larger IT consultancies, mostly based in London and the South East, who are the only ones who could afford to be accredited to deliver stuff on behalf of government. And if you combine that with a bureaucratic procurement process, it tends to leave government in a bit of a tricky position and not able to make full advantage of innovations coming out of small businesses. But cloud has changed a lot of that. So in 2012, the government introduced a thing called G-Cloud, which is a standardised set of frameworks to reduce the cost of bidding and procuring, and a centralised digital marketplace in which public sector customers could easily connect with suppliers no matter their size. And it's completely transparent, so you can see who's won what contract, how much that contract is worth. And a crucial element here has been the existence of large-scale cloud platforms such as Amazon Web Services. So we've been directly available through G-Cloud since 2013, but as importantly, AWS services act as an underlying platform for SMEs, allowing them to build off a technology stack which has got best practice already baked in, and they can focus their energies on doing what they do best, which is building innovative new services. AWS is proud to be a strategic supplier to government. Over many years, UK government departments and more broadly in the public sector have developed real deep capability and skills to leverage the power of cloud platforms alongside their own technology supply chains. There's now thousands of British technology and professional services firms helping customers in the UK and overseas maximise the potential of cloud. And I think this is particularly evident during the pandemic when, by and large, the IT didn't fall over. So from rolling out contact tracing apps for all of the UK's 4 home nations, to universal credit being spun up at scale to cope with kind of rapidly increasing demand, to HMRC rolling out the platform on live the furlough scheme in 4 weeks. This is all off the back of officials deeply understanding platforms like ours and working with their SME partners to build services which are useful and delightful and more efficient. So cloud providers like AWS provide commodity IT, which is what we call the undifferentiated heavy lifting, or the boring bits. The clever bit is customers, so government departments working with their SME supply chain to put these building blocks together to deliver something impactful. And that's what we're going to kind of hear about. So I'm going to hand over to Joe from Airbox to talk about how they use the power of cloud to deliver great services. So, Joe.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, everyone. So, Airbox Systems, we deliver situational awareness tools, so software, predominantly to the emergency services. But what does that mean? I'm going to assume no prior knowledge because usually nobody does have any prior knowledge of it. The situational tools allow you to prepare, plan and respond in emergency situations. So it will be data that is available to you. It allows multi-agency operating, so we are the leading provider of situational awareness tools to the emergency services, so we link the police, the fire, the ambulance service and other government agencies in an emergency situation. We're involved in around 100,000 operations a year, to give you an idea of the scale of what we do. There are only around 60 employees that we have in order to do that. What we deal with is we deal with what we call as the final mile, and we deal with things on a single pane of glass. So our products allow people to operate from static devices and also mobile devices. So if there's an emergency situation, in effect you could have fire, police, ambulance services all looking at the same picture at any one time, and that can be updated in real time. So it would allow you to geofence areas. Predominantly, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce the risk of loss of life, particularly in the first instance to the emergency responders, and making sure that the emergency responders are able to get into a situation or a geographical area in the shortest amount of time in a safe way. So we also deliver Resilience Direct for Cabinet Office. If nobody's ever heard of that, it's a real unsung hero. So that is available to all Category 1 and Category 2 responders. So it's an online private network in which they can also plan and prepare for emergency situations. Our kit also has what's called e-logging. So if you're using that tool, it's admissible evidence in court. So at a later stage, it can be used for that. We use AWS as IaaS, so that's information as a service. What it allows us to be agile. We're only a really small company. We've got really tight margins. We're dealing with the government here. Our customer acquisition time is around 3 years for UK customers. So Amazon allows us to surge up and surge down at the push of a button. That elasticity is one of the most important things. It means that if there is an emergency situation, immediately we're able to up the data that we can store and the server space that we need, and we can take that back down straight away. So that's just one of the benefits of working with AWS. Are you happy if I pass on to you now, Ben?
Yep. Mine is.
Yeah.
Right.
Sam, go ahead.
I'm conscious there's a lot of noise, so I'm going to shout a little bit for fear of losing our third attendee. I'm Dan. 4 years ago, and if you'd asked me anything about digitisation in government, I wouldn't have had a clue what you were talking about. For the last 18 years, I've been a barrister, I still am, and I specialise in prosecuting organised crime groups. I'm one of the Attorney General's appointed counsel, and I sit in some minor judicial capacities. And I was asked to go to a pub 4 years ago by people who worked within UK intelligence and Special Forces IT, because they had an idea and they thought that they might need a boring lawyer to help them build a product. I was that boring lawyer. Off the back of a discussion around a problem statement, we decided we'd make that a company, which is the first time I'd ever done that in my life. And a company called Synologic was bred. If you'd asked me what AWS was, I would have said that's where you go if you want to watch Lord of the Rings. I had no idea about cloud services and cloud compute. What we do is that there are a vast amount of people within government, in local authorities, HMRC, the insolvency service and police forces, who, when we're trying to decide whether there's risk somewhere, whether somebody is a terrorist, whether somebody is committing a fraud, those investigators have to log in and out of lots of different silos of information that sit in Great Lakes all over the place, with lots of different logins and outs and passwords and all this other stuff. And as counsel in court, I was seeing massive delays because it was taking forever for people to log in and out of all these data sets and compile all that information and work out what it all meant. Is this a risk to my council? Is this a risk to my MPs? And I was told by these very clever people who understood tech and didn't think AWS was Lord of the Rings, that they could build a bit of kit that would draw into all of these data sets at once in real time. And so we created a platform on AWS cloud-based services that would aggregate all of these sources of information. That was the beginning of a bit of a kit that we called Scout. The company started then, we're now 65 people, and to give you an idea of where we sit within government, because none of you will have heard of us, we risk assess all of the grant funding that's paid out of our government through BAYS. We are next month about to become the risk assessment platform that protects members of Parliament and royal dignitaries from information being leaked on the web about them that presents risk to them and the potential for harm. We are about to go live with 5 local councils next month, creating a national fraud network that will replace, hopefully, NAFN and allow councils to save money and not give it to criminals in the way that, unfortunately, has happened so often, and I've ended up prosecuting them. We're now about to move into the vetting space, where we're going to doing vetting and personnel checks on anybody who wants to work in policing. And we're involved in a variety of these different and very sensitive projects because we create a cloud-based secure platform that allows us to delve into all these great data lakes and find risk for all these very significant entities. We also work in banking and insurance and lots of other areas like that, but I find them far less interesting, and that's why I'm not even going to touch upon it today. But why do we use cloud-based tech? I think in talking to a lot of people in councils and in government entities, there is a fear that it is less secure than using computer terminals popping on hard drives. That's no longer the case. We've proved that. We now work with the National Crime Agency dealing with risk profiling of people for Europol. So when we're thinking about the levels of data and how specialist and sensitive it is, we've now demonstrated that you can use AWS Kit to process that information in a way that helps us remain at the forefront of European criminal inquiries and international ones. And so we'd encourage everybody here to adopt this approach of using cloud-based technologies. Government is doing that now on a very large scale, and thankfully we as SMEs can now hop on the back of these huge technologies provided by the likes of AWS and solve problems for local authorities, council entities and the like. So that's what we do. I'd love to talk about lots of questions around it all. I say that really as a flavour in the hope that it'll provoke some questions, and I'm grateful none of you left the room while I was chatting, so thank you for that at least.
Thanks, Dan. Phil, do you want to give the perspective from a local authority and what you do for Hackney?
I hope I don't drive people out of the room as well. That would be really unfortunate. So I lead a London borough. I became mayor in 2016, and I was convinced by the Director of Digital to keep the digital portfolio within my sort of cabinet portfolio as an elected leader. That wasn't my intention going into the conversation because we'd had some real challenges over our technology. Our contact centres were quite old-fashioned, and most of the conversations I had with colleagues and residents were problems around platform, phone answering, photocopiers not working. And the last thing I wanted to do as a new leader was to be responsible for all of that. But he convinced me that we were on a pathway to real change within the organisation. And we were at that time bringing all of our digital services in-house. So we'd had a traditional outsourced contract. It was part of our journey of insourcing that I'm really proud of. And I came to conferences and I met private sector organisations. And I think there was a bit of a, do you think you know it all? Do you think you can do it all? Is this going to make you a kind of big statist kind of structure, and actually you're going to miss out on those opportunities to innovate? And it was the exact reverse. When Hackney had outsourced IT services, it could not tap into all of those SMEs in Shoreditch, in Dalston, in Hackney Wick, and all of that creative energy, and people that wanted to do tech for good, and do the types of innovations that we've heard from Joe and Dan, because we were trapped in a very sort of clunky outsourced model. So bringing those services in, having that expertise, effectively having our own head of digital, then allowed us to think about what are the citizen and service problems that we want to solve with SMEs and other providers. And one of the really good early examples was we were creating a new employment platform that was to work with people that frankly were quite beaten up by Job Centre Plus and DWP. And we wanted a user-centre application process that would collect resident data and allow our job brokerage and our job coaches to work with people in a new way. And if you filled in all those forms and you just don't trust the state, we wanted something that was co-produced with them. We did that with a local SME, just sort of one example of what we were trying to lead. About a couple of years later, some of those principals, a group of digital directors in London had come together and said, we're starting to see the Scottish Government, we're seeing gov.gov in national government, there's been this local government declaration, we should be coming together as London and sort of replicating some of those structures and saying, we're going to have a digital officer in City Hall, what can we do? And so London Council's pulled their resources in the London Office of Technology and Innovation and took some of the principles that places like Hackney have got, which is open source, public sector paying once, really collaborating around sort of knowledge and bringing forward. And so we do that, and there's been work on skills, mapping all the different contracts councils have, sharing best practice, looking at the sort of skills gaps that local authorities have, and collaborating with big and small businesses at a London level and thinking about how we can just do tech better. Other things we were looking at is data sharing principles. Can we have one data sharing sort of principle document for all of London that allows us to collaborate with the Met Police, allows us to share data with the GLA, and that sort of rolled out. I'm going to move to where we are in cloud technology. Some of you may be aware that for all of this digital innovation and investment in our own resources and services, we were subject to a criminal cyber attack in October 2020. And effectively, our cloud-based systems were unaffected and continued. And if you think we were in a pandemic, so all our staff were working at home, all the things about contact tracing and those new things we created that were literally saving lives, they were back up and running if they had failed within 48 hours. All of those server-based, traditional legacy systems were affected by the cyber attack and what had happened to us. And I think if we hadn't taken some of those decisions to start moving into cloud-based systems, collaborating in new ways, investing in that secure technology, collaborating with people like AWS, that cyber attack would have been worse, but we wouldn't have been able to keep those services going during COVID. So, running contact centres remotely, doing contact tracing remotely, bringing services together in new ways around income maximisation, poverty, all of that was possible. So where we are now is continuing that investment journey in cloud-based computing. The surge ability has been absolutely essential as well, because as we recovered our data and servers, we need capacity to go through those documents, re-index them and reconnect them with the databases that run services. That means we need to expand and contract as we recover data almost in real time to do that detailed work in-house and with our partners. And I don't think if we'd been able to do that flexing, we would have been able to again respond to that cyber attack, recover those systems, get them back into the products that then make them work for our residents. So the best of times and the worst of times, really. But I think the innovation that we've been able to unlock, the new relationships, and the new ways of working, becoming a less hierarchical organisation. I sort of finished because there'll be politicians in the room. Being able to collaborate with colleagues, with parts of the council, and really see policy making and decision making in real time and looking at data sets has transformed us as an organisation. I get to work with the front line in a way as leader I never could have done if you were just on traditional systems. So I'm sure we'll get into more detailed conversations, but that's a bit of a hackney journey and why I think this agenda is so important.
Thanks so much. I mean, well done for recovering from the cyber attack. I can imagine it was quite a difficult experience, or really quite difficult time for the country. We'll open up for questions in a minute. I want to ask actually about some kind of SMEs here. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, one of which is skills. How do you bring in skills into your companies for people who kind of know what to do? And actually, we'll talk about kind of from the local authority side, but how do you, are there enough of them? Where do you get them from? What would you like to see is different? And then we sort of touched on, there's some procurement stuff there, which is how can you make it easier and faster in order to kind of, work with government, whether it's at the central level or the local level, in order to form those innovative partnerships and kind of develop better services. So, Joe, were you happy to kick off on either of those two?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's usually most SMEs' bugbear is skills. For us, it's particularly pronounced because the areas that we work in, quite often we have to have people on shore, we have to have security clearances, so we're fishing from a much smaller pool. We don't have massive VC backing or anything like that, so our pockets aren't deep. So we very much have to push forward the mission that we have. And that's the thing that excites people and that draws people to us and gets people to stay. And it's that does really get people up at 3-4 in the morning, because we're working with emergency services. If they need us, if they need somebody to be online, that's what happens. AWS have actually been really supportive in that, because of course we want to grow our talent in-house as well as we grow. So we have recruited 2 support engineers through AWS through the Restart programme. So one of our key things in the business is the purpose, but also inclusivity by default. So one of our main drivers is that we think that there should be more social mobility. So working with AWS and taking on some of the people that have gone through their course to retrain, who've already been identified for their potential rather than previous experience, means that we can confidently take people on into the business and take a chance on them and give them an opportunity. So we've recently taken on 2 support engineers, and we're trying to do that in something called DevOps as well. And DevOps, if anybody works in tech, is the most difficult area to recruit for, and everybody is always stealing your staff and offering them phenomenal amounts of money. And so the program that AWS has, in order to take people who are from totally different careers, or maybe have not had a career at all in the past, retrain them and give them basic DevOps skills, is a lifesaver. With regards to procurement, I think one of the most our customer acquisition time for UK government is around 3 years. It's never really gone below that. There's been the occasional instance during COVID where somebody would phone up with a credit card and say, we need licenses. But if you compare and contrast that to the Netherlands, 6 months. So then, and the US, kind of like you're talking about weeks. So they very much take a risk-based approach, and they're much more comfortable with that. UK government are fantastic, but 3 years to be able to develop a product that they want and introduce functionality, and they want that up front before you even get a purchase order in, is a massive strain on small businesses. But we're still doing it, we're still determined. It's the 90% of our business, and it's where the focus of the founders are, it's where their interests are. That we have business with the commercial sector, but kind of back to what Dan mentioned, what they really believe in, what really drives the business is the emergency services.
Dan, is that your experience as well?
On the question about skills, it's the joys of starting a company 18 months before COVID started was particularly challenging. I think we've moved from a business that said you must be able to commute to our office on a pretty regular basis to being able to say, we don't mind if you want to be home-based, as long as you meet our requirements, we'll employ you. That opened up the job market massively for us, but it comes with its own problems, and we've had to address stress within DevOps teams, because a lot of these are young, very bright, very intelligent people, many of whom are on the spectrum and things like that, and we have to cater for that as a business and make sure they're looked after. So it comes with its own problems as well, but by being able to expand and say you do not need to be office-based has really helped with recruitment. Employing somebody as we got big enough to just do in-house HR rather than paying a massive proportion to recruitment companies really helped as well. And then finally, trying to get through the clearance processes quicker, because much like Joe's company, almost all of our team have to be security cleared or develop vetted to deal with the sensitive databases that we have access to. So we've been able to get through those processes a little quicker, and now that we're actually the tool that automates vetting, that really helps. So that's the issue with regards to skills. In terms of procurement into government, we were forced, because of how painful it is selling to you, both councils and the state, we were forced to target the private sector to make enough money so that we could justify the mission statement for myself and the other founders. We moved into the insurance industry, the gambling sector and banking, so that we could get contracts that created enough revenue so that we could then either get VC funding or take the business further. Thankfully, a couple of key organisations like HMRC did quite quickly get through funding, but we had to piggyback off other existing contracts with other bigger incumbent businesses, which definitely helped. But I think the biggest problem from my perspective in selling into government and local authorities at the moment is the budget holders and the operational people who want to buy bits of kit will often very quickly make a decision and say, that will change our world. That process currently takes X, we can do it in a quarter of X, brilliant, I want to do it tomorrow. And then we are being delayed by IT, information security people, data protection, all with very valid and good reasons. I'm not criticising why they do what they do, but they're painfully slow at what they do, they're under-resourced, and you lose months. And that's months when your councils or government entities are spending millions of pounds giving money out to fraudsters and the like. We found ourselves in the middle of the COVID furloughed worker scheme. We actually applied to Innovate UK for £50,000 worth of funding to pay us to put a platform into HMRC to help them check fraud for a particular type of COVID scheme. We proved a 93% efficiency within HMRC for our platform at that time, and I'm still in procurement waiting for them to buy it now, 2 years later. It's painful. So finding ways to get better resource into IT, InfoSec, because there's too many people who can block good things from happening in government, and they can't get squashed sufficiently quickly, in my opinion, by people in power to say, no, just get on with it.
Yeah, I mean, the point is sort of like government wants to do these things, but it's still taking them 2 years, 3 years to actually kind of buy and put into development the thing they want to do in the first place, which is, I mean, you do it 6 months in development, then it must be possible. So do you want to talk about sort of from different perspectives?
One of the things I was sort of saying about what we're trying to do through Lottie is to try and do that once. So some of that data sharing statements, making sure that they're signed off by all the legal. Getting to that point, it's taken a long time, but it should improve how we work with each other and then how we work with suppliers and collaboration. So I think it's absolutely vital, and that's the sort of the whole principles that government are working towards in terms of open data and improving services. On the skills gaps, one of the things we decided to do was to restructure that team once it came in-house. And we had an eye on effectively there would be, when you're maintaining traditional server type relationships and platforms, they often have a client and an expertise within our organisation. So if you run Matrix in adult and children's social care, you will have Matrix experts within your IT teams maintaining those systems. We still work with Matrix, it's really important to our social care team, and it was a critical part of our recovery from the cyber attack. But there are other areas where we know over time we're not going to be using those types of services anymore. So we created 20 digital apprenticeships within the council around those areas of growth business in terms of digital, partly to grow our own, but also to bring in others from outside. And I think that continuous investment in our own workforce, so we've got cybersecurity developers, less on the kind of maintaining traditional networks and kit and servers, has really made us a more adult organisation able to work better. And there was a point, I don't think it's strictly true now, but there was a mission to get 100 digital apprentices all across London, and 1 in 5 of them was in Hackney. So that sort of was our commitment, and I think we need to keep returning to that, because those skills don't stand still. And that diversity point, we recruit from Hackney and we try and recruit matching the residents that we work. So when you meet our tech apprentices, they look like Hackney. The rest of that digital team probably don't quite so much. And that was a really important sort of part of what we were wanting to do, break some of those glass ceilings. And we're just completing a diversity and tech commission about what does business need from training and schools What do residents think about working in the tech industry and those barriers? And what's really interesting is the alignment is you don't have to have digital skills to work in tech. You have to be adaptable, you have to have good communication skills, problem solving skills, and they're the things that are actually most in short supply in business. So we'll be launching that hopefully with Here East, one of our partners in the Olympic Park, as part of the work on sustainable innovation. I think it shows that you can meet in the middle. That wish to see jobs actually working for local people. You know, we talked a lot today at conference from Care that trickle-down economics don't work. People have been seeing those businesses and those industries grow in Hackney and London, and they don't think they can get into it. We can answer that with the right collaboration and the right investment in skills, but also just breaking those barriers down about what does business need.
Excellent. All right, thank you all. I'm gonna open up for questions. I've got a couple of things that we talked about, but from you lots, I'm going to go. Bill.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Bill Esterson. I'm the Shadow Business and Industry Minister. I think I was due to be on the panel, but apologies, my previous one. Because of Keir's speech, I was late for the previous one, and because of the previous one. Anyway, just picking up on that discussion about skills and about procurement. So I'd like to talk to all three of you technically. That's probably the better way of taking this forward. But really interesting what you said about procurement, because what Angela announced, what's in the industrial strategy on procurement and opening up and breaking down the kind of horrendous barriers that you described is absolutely critical if we're going to open up the wider economy, especially in the kind of sectors that you all represent. So this is probably more of a kind of an ask to help me to come up with the answers than anything else we do. And on skills, points are well made. I just add into the mix that some entrepreneurs are blessed with good core management and leadership skills, entrepreneurial skills. Lots of us aren't. And I say us because I've been an entrepreneur for a bit before I've been a member of Parliament. And if we really want to get the best out of the investment in tech, we want to get the best out of our really high quality technicians and engineers and data analysts. We've also got to deal with the core skills, the relationship building, running a growing effective business, the entrepreneurial skills, but those leadership management skills too. So I completely agree about the technical side of it, but let's remember those as well. So I really, this is more of a statement because I want to engage with you, please. So if we could do that, then really great.
Right. Thanks, any other points from folk here? And then skills, procurement, anything? If not, Dan, you mentioned about security. I mean, you and Joe both work in businesses which deal with a lot of sensitive information. Do you want to talk a bit about kind of how moving, and Phil talked about this as well, which is like the resilience of his cloud systems actually more than the on-prem stuff. But can you, from your perspective, talk about your security and how you approach that and making sure you're content with what's sort of baked into the tools?
Yeah. When you approach a local authority, a police force or a government entity, most of them now thankfully have cloud-based environments that they use for something. That something might be to check a particular repository of information or to store the data they have on where they pay a certain amount of funding, whatever it may be. Barriers have been broken down to have that there in the first place, so thankfully we got through the first phase of it. But obviously what my pitch as a company entails is saying to them, well, you're 5 different councils in London, or you're the DWP, the Insolvency Service and HMRC. Why on earth, when any one of you finds risk within your pot of information in your cloud, why don't the others all know about it? So I've been involved with a variety of different projects where we're looking to pull together entities so they can share cloud databases so that we can identify risk between them. And whether you're making checks for money laundering purposes or terrorism financing, risks and alerts can come through within the same secure platform. But coming back to Clive's question, what that then means is somebody says, well, how safe is this? Well, we're based just outside of Cheltenham, and most of our team, I'm proud to say, worked within the intelligence community or the UK Special Forces IT teams. So they've lived and breathed those environments, and they're all security cleared. And so we constantly create and replicate secure environments using technologies like AWS's, which are robust. but the amount of bureaucracy we have to go through to demonstrate that we have met these tasks is unbelievable. When you go and speak to a local authority, some of the biggest questionnaires I get before I can provide a facility to a council will run through 150 different questions about how is this constructed and how safe is it. You can't point to ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials qualifications, all of which require you to go through probably the same 150 questions and much more to get them in the first place, and quickly zip from question 1 to question 150 and say, yes, it's secure, it's off. You can't say to them, well, the National Crime Agency used this with Europol. That's a pretty good start. We can replicate that for you. And so it's very frustrating. And so what you end up having to do is, as a business, you have to recruit and build a compliance team who spend their lives answering questionnaires rather than actually building technologies and providing services into government and resolving these issues. And so not only is our tech trying to pull together the data sets of all of your organisations so you can find risk better and solve problems quicker, but I'm now having to actually create an independent private company of people who answer questions to pull you all together to say, can your IT team speak to this data protection person here? And everybody has to say yes, and eventually we get things over the line. So I think my concerns, as I've said before, they lie more with the people than the technology. The technologies answer the important questions. The example that was given there just exemplifies it. Our systems are all backed up every 15 minutes. All the backups are all within the UK. A lot of other systems, before they move to cloud-based tech, are far less secure. They're not backed up at all, and they're not resilient. So these technologies, in many respects, not all, are an absolute no-brainer for government in solving problems. The security of them really isn't one of them, and we can prove it very quickly without 150 questions.